This is not an accident that you are here. If you felt a quiet pull to listen, a subtle urgency you could not explain, or a sense that something within you has been stirring, that is your confirmation. This moment was not discovered by chance. It was arranged. The timing is intentional. The message is precise. You are not watching or reading this randomly. You are responding to a spiritual appointment that was set long before you were aware of it. There are moments in life when awareness opens without warning, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. You feel it as a pause in your thoughts, a stillness in your chest, a recognition that something important is unfolding, even if you cannot yet name it. That is what has drawn you here. Heaven often guides through intuition rather than explanation. The invitation comes before the understanding. What is preparing to unfold now is not small. It is not a temporary shift or a passing feeling. It is a life-altering transformation, one that has been forming beneath the surface through seasons you once misunderstood. The waiting, the delays, the confusion, the moments of silence you thought meant nothing was happening. They were not empty. They were active. Something has been assembling in the unseen, and tonight marks the moment it begins to surface. You may have noticed the signs without fully realizing what they meant. A growing restlessness with old patterns, a resistance to returning to what once felt normal, a desire for alignment rather than achievement. These are not symptoms of dissatisfaction. They are signals of readiness. When the soul outgrows its surroundings, it begins to stir. That stirring is not discomfort for its own sake. It is preparation for transition. Transformation rarely announces itself with certainty. More often, it begins as anticipation without clarity. You sense movement before you see evidence. You feel change before it has a name. This is why doubt often tries to speak loudest at the threshold. But doubt does not cancel alignment. It confirms proximity. When something significant is approaching, resistance increases not because you are wrong, but because you are close. The inner stirring you feel is not imagination. It is recognition. Something within you already knows what is coming, even if your mind is still catching up. Your spirit responds faster than logic. It recognizes timing before strategy. That recognition is why you cannot shake the feeling that this moment matters. It does. You are standing at a turning point. Not a dramatic instant overhaul, but a decisive shift in direction. Turning points do not always change everything at once, but they change what happens next. They alter trajectory. They mark the end of drifting and the beginning of intentional movement. Tonight is not about hype or emotional elevation. It is about awareness and choice. A spiritual appointment does not force action. It presents opportunity. You are being given clarity, not about every step, but about the need to move, about the necessity of alignment, about the truth that remaining where you are is no longer neutral. Standing still now is a decision in itself. Life-altering transformation does not begin when circumstances change. It begins when perception shifts. When you realize that what you have been waiting for has also been waiting for you. When you understand that readiness is not the absence of fear, but the presence of resolve. When you stop asking, "Am I ready?" and start asking, "Am I willing?" This moment has been approaching longer than you realize. Every experience that sharpened your discernment, every disappointment that redirected your expectations, every closed door that forced you inward rather than outward, all of it was shaping your capacity to recognize this call. If this message resonates, it is because something in you has already aligned with it. You are guided here because you are able to hear it. Not everyone would recognize this moment. Some would dismiss it. Some would scroll past it. Some would feel the stirring and ignore it. But you stayed. That matters. Attention is not accidental. Focus is a form of consent. By being present, you are already participating. And now comes the declaration that anchors this moment. Tonight is the turning point. Not because everything changes instantly, but because you do. Your posture shifts. Your willingness activates. Your awareness deepens. You stop waiting for permission and start listening for alignment. You no longer ask if something is happening. You acknowledge that it already is. Turning points are quiet before they are visible. They begin internally, long before they reshape the external. Tonight marks the internal shift, the recognition, the alignment, the moment you stop resisting what has been calling you forward. You may not yet know how it will unfold. You may not see the full path ahead, but you do not need the map to take the first step. You only need to recognize the moment for what it is. This is not coincidence. This is not random. This is not delayed. This is the moment you were meant to encounter, and what you do with it begins now. A spiritual awakening is taking place, accompanied by divine acceleration. What once moved slowly is now shifting rapidly. Awareness is sharpening. Timing is aligning. You are entering a season where momentum replaces stagnation. This is not self-generated energy. It is heaven-initiated movement. When awakening and acceleration occur together, it signals that preparation has reached completion. For a long time, progress felt delayed. Effort did not equal outcome. You pushed, planned, prayed, and waited often without visible return. But delay was not denial. It was calibration. Awakening does not begin with speed, it begins with clarity. Before heaven accelerates anything externally, it realigns everything internally. That realignment has been happening quietly beneath the surface long before momentum became visible. You may notice that your perception has changed. What once distracted you no longer holds power. What once excited you now feels misaligned. You are more sensitive to what drains you and more drawn to what grounds you. This sharpening of awareness is not coincidence. It is a prerequisite for acceleration. Speed without clarity leads to collapse. Momentum without discernment leads to misdirection. Heaven accelerates only what is aligned. Divine acceleration does not feel frantic. It feels focused. Unlike human-driven urgency, which creates anxiety and pressure, heaven-initiated movement brings calm even as things move quickly. You may still feel the stretch, but you no longer feel scattered. Your decisions feel cleaner. Your priorities feel clearer. You are learning to recognize the difference between being busy and being aligned. This distinction matters in the season you are entering. Acceleration follows agreement. Agreement between who you are becoming and what you are called to carry. Agreement between your values and your actions. Agreement between your inner convictions and your outer choices. This is why certain doors that once seemed promising had to close. They did not match the speed or direction of what was forming. Heaven will not accelerate you into compromise. As momentum builds, you may feel an unfamiliar sense of urgency, not panic, but readiness. A quiet knowing that the time for preparation has ended and the time for movement has begun. This does not mean you have all the answers. It means you now have alignment. And alignment is more powerful than certainty. Awakening awakens responsibility. When awareness increases, so does accountability. You begin to see more clearly where you have been hesitating, where fear has delayed obedience, where comfort has slowed growth. Acceleration exposes what must be addressed quickly. There is less tolerance for indecision because the window for movement is opening. You may notice that situations resolve faster now. What once took months to process internally now takes days. What once lingered unresolved now demands immediate clarity. This is a sign of acceleration. The pace of refinement increases when preparation is complete. Heaven is no longer stretching you slowly. It is trusting you to adjust quickly. This season requires responsiveness, not impulsiveness, but responsiveness. The ability to hear, discern, and move without excessive delay. You are being trained to trust what has been built within you. The long season of preparation formed discernment you can now rely on. You do not need constant confirmation. You need alignment. Divine acceleration often feels like opportunity colliding with readiness. Opportunities appear suddenly. Conversations open doors. Decisions create momentum. None of it feels forced, but all of it feels timely. You may look back and realize how precisely events are lining up. This is not coincidence. This is orchestration. Awakening also brings sensitivity to resistance. As momentum increases, so does opposition. Doubt may attempt to resurface. Old fears may try to reassert themselves. This is not regression. It is confirmation. Resistance intensifies when movement is close. Do not interpret friction as a sign to stop. Learn to discern whether it is a warning or a test of resolve. Acceleration does not eliminate challenge. It reframes it. Challenges no longer feel like barriers. They feel like adjustments. You approach them differently. You do not panic. You assess. You respond. This shift in posture is evidence that awakening has taken root. You are no longer reacting from survival, but moving from alignment. Preparation. Reaching completion does not mean perfection. It means readiness. Readiness to learn while moving. Readiness to adjust while progressing. Readiness to carry responsibility without retreating. Heaven does not wait for flawlessness. It waits for faithfulness. The acceleration you are experiencing is not because you have arrived, but because you are aligned enough to continue. This is why restlessness and peace can coexist. You feel stirred, but not unsettled. Moved, but not anxious. This paradox is common in seasons of acceleration. The spirit recognizes movement, while the mind is still catching up. Trust the peace more than the noise. You are stepping into a flow you did not create. That is why it feels different, less effortful, more intentional. You are not pushing momentum. You are cooperating with it. This cooperation requires humility, the willingness to follow guidance rather than control outcomes. Acceleration responds to surrender. You may notice that your prayers are changing. Less begging, more alignment, less asking for signs, more listening for direction. This shift reflects maturity. You are no longer seeking reassurance. You are seeking instruction. Heaven responds to that posture. Awakening sharpens discernment about timing. You become more aware of when to move and when to wait. Acceleration does not mean constant motion. It means precise motion, knowing when to act and when to pause. This wisdom was formed in the waiting seasons you once resented. Now you understand their value. Everything that felt slow was teaching you how to move well when things speed up. Without that training, acceleration would overwhelm you. With it, momentum becomes manageable. You are not late. You are on time. The awakening you feel is confirmation that something has shifted permanently. You will not return to the way things were, not because you are superior, but because you are aware. Awareness changes everything. Acceleration is now a matter of stewardship. How you respond matters. What you choose matters. Alignment must be maintained as momentum builds. Stay grounded. Stay clear. Stay responsive. This season will require courage, not reckless action, but faithful movement. The awakening has occurred. The acceleration has begun. Preparation has done its work. Now your task is simple but not easy. Move with what is moving you, and trust that the one who initiated this momentum knows exactly where it is leading. There is a transition underway from wanting to having, from asking to receiving. Desire initiated the journey, but alignment sustains it. You are no longer positioned as one who only seeks. You are being positioned as one who receives. As written, the Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of his bounty. Deuteronomy 28:12. Heaven's storehouse opens not to impulse, but to readiness. For a long time, wanting was necessary. Wanting awakened hunger. Asking built dependence. Seeking trained humility. Those stages were not weakness. They were foundation. But there comes a moment when remaining in perpetual wanting becomes misalignment. When you are ready to receive, but still behave as if you are unqualified, you unintentionally resist what is being released. This transition marks a change in posture, not in worth. Receiving requires a different identity than wanting. Those who only want often feel powerless, waiting for permission signs or perfect conditions. Those who are ready to receive move with responsibility. They understand that what comes next must be stewarded, not merely enjoyed. Heaven does not release abundance to be consumed. It releases it to be carried, managed, and multiplied. That is why readiness matters more than intensity of desire. Alignment is what sustains what desire began. Desire can start the journey, but it cannot finish it. Desire fluctuates. Alignment stabilizes. Desire says, I hope. Alignment says, I am positioned. This is why your inner world has been shifting. You have been learning to think differently, not as someone chasing blessing, but as someone preparing to hold it without losing integrity. You may notice that your prayers sound different now. Less desperation, more clarity, less bargaining, more trust. This is not loss of passion. It is maturity of faith. You are no longer asking from lack. You are aligning from expectation. Expectation does not demand, it prepares. It creates space internally for what is approaching externally. Receiving is not passive. It requires participation, awareness, discernment, obedience. When heaven opens its storehouse, it does not pour randomly. It releases in measure according to capacity. That capacity is not measured by talent alone, but by character, consistency, and clarity. This is why certain things had to be healed first. Old wounds distort receiving. Unresolved bitterness contaminates stewardship. Fear-based thinking mismanages increase. Before heaven increases what is in your hands, it stabilizes what is in your heart. You were not delayed. You were being aligned. The shift from asking to receiving also changes responsibility. When you ask, you wait. When you receive, you act. Action requires courage. It requires faith that what has been given is sufficient. Many pray for open doors, but hesitate to walk through them because receiving exposes them to accountability. You can no longer blame lack. You must now steward opportunity. This is why readiness matters more than excitement. Excitement fades quickly. Readiness endures. Heaven does not respond to emotional spikes. It responds to sustained alignment. That is why your preparation took time. You were being trained to remain grounded even when things increase. Receiving also requires release. Hands cannot hold new provision if they are clenched around old patterns. Minds cannot recognize new opportunity if they are fixed on past disappointment. Hearts cannot steward blessing if they are still defined by scarcity. Clearing space is not punishment. It is preparation. You are being repositioned, not as someone standing outside the door, knocking endlessly, but as someone standing inside, learning how the house functions. The questions change. Instead of, will this happen? You begin asking, how do I steward this well? That shift signals maturity. Heaven's storehouse opening does not mean everything arrives at once. It means access has been granted. Flow has begun. Timing has aligned. What comes will come in sequence, not chaos. You are learning to trust process, even in increase. To stay humble, even as doors open. To remain discerning, even as options expand. Receiving tests faith in a new way. When you were asking, faith meant believing something would come. Now faith means believing you are capable of carrying what arrives. This is often more challenging. Doubt does not disappear. It changes form. Instead of, what if it never happens? It becomes, what if I fail with what I receive? This is where alignment sustains you. Alignment reminds you that what comes is not random. It was prepared for, matched to you, measured for your growth. Heaven does not release assignment without equipping the assignee. You are not stepping into something foreign. You are stepping into what has been forming you. You may feel a sense of holy weight now, not pressure, but responsibility. An awareness that what you once prayed for carries consequence, influence, impact, reach. This weight is not meant to intimidate you. It is meant to anchor you, to keep you grounded as things shift. Receiving also requires patience. Even in acceleration, there is order. You are learning not to rush what is unfolding, not to grasp prematurely, not to consume what must be cultivated. This restraint is part of your readiness. You are no longer asking to be seen. You are being entrusted to see, to discern, to decide, to lead yourself with wisdom. This is why silence no longer frightens you. You trust what has been built within you. You understand that guidance does not always come loudly. The transition from wanting to having is subtle but irreversible. Once awareness shifts, you cannot return to unconscious longing. You now recognize opportunity when it appears. You recognize alignment when it settles. You recognize when heaven is moving. Because you are no longer dependent on constant signs, you are responsive to internal confirmation. This is the posture of receiving. Open hands, clear heart, renewed mind. Heaven's storehouse opens not because you demanded it, but because you prepared for it. And now, what you once reached for is reaching back. The season has changed. You are no longer only asking. You are ready to receive. Breakthrough requires more than desire. It requires capacity. Blessings demand space. Hands must be free to receive. The heart must be cleared of bitterness, fear, and distraction. The mind must release old limitations and unaligned thinking. What you are stepping into cannot coexist with what no longer serves you. Clearing space is not loss. It is preparation. Capacity is rarely discussed, yet it determines everything. Many desire transformation, abundance, peace, or elevation, but few pause to consider whether their inner structure can sustain it. Heaven does not withhold because of unwillingness. It waits because of wisdom. Just as a vessel can only hold what its size allows, your life can only carry what your inner framework supports. Expansion begins internally before it manifests externally. This is why preparation often feels like subtraction. Things fall away. Relationships change. Old habits lose their appeal. Familiar patterns begin to feel heavy instead of comforting. This is not regression, it is refinement. Space is being created, and space is essential. Nothing new can enter a life that is already overcrowded. Blessings require room to move, grow, and settle. Free hands symbolize readiness. Hands that are clenched cannot receive. Hands filled with old commitments, outdated identities, and unresolved attachments have no room for what is coming. Letting go is not weakness, it is wisdom. You are not being asked to abandon what mattered. You are being asked to release what no longer aligns. Some things served you in one season, but would restrict you in the next. The heart must also be cleared. Bitterness is heavy. Fear is constricting. Distraction fragments focus. These are not small things. They are internal obstacles that limit capacity. A heart weighed down by resentment cannot steward peace. A heart governed by fear cannot manage expansion. A distracted heart cannot recognize opportunity when it arrives. Clearing the heart does not mean denying pain. It means refusing to let pain define direction. Acknowledging what hurt you is part of healing. Carrying it forward indefinitely is not. Bitterness may feel protective, but it quietly drains energy and clarity. Fear may feel cautious, but it limits movement. Distraction may feel harmless, but it erodes discernment. The mind, too, must be renewed. Old limitations often hide behind familiar thoughts. This is just how things are. People like me don't get that. I've tried before. It didn't work. These thoughts feel logical because they are familiar, but familiarity does not equal truth. What once protected you from disappointment may now be preventing growth. Unaligned thinking cannot coexist with new reality. If your mind is still anchored to past outcomes, it will misinterpret present opportunity. You may overlook doors because they don't look like what you imagined. You may resist change because it feels unfamiliar. Capacity expands when the mind becomes flexible, open to new methods, new timing, new expressions of provision. Clearing space is an intentional act. It requires honesty. It requires courage. It requires the willingness to sit with discomfort rather than immediately fill it. Many people rush to replace what they release, but preparation often involves a pause. That pause is not emptiness, it is alignment. It is where clarity settles and direction sharpens. This is why stillness has been increasing in your life. Not because nothing is happening, but because something is aligning. Noise disrupts capacity. Overactivity masks misalignment. Stillness allows you to recognize what truly belongs and what must go. You are learning to listen more deeply, not just to external instruction, but to internal confirmation. What you are stepping into demands integrity. Greater influence requires greater clarity. Increased provision requires disciplined stewardship. Expanded opportunity requires focused intention. Capacity is not just about how much you can receive. It is about how well you can sustain what arrives without losing yourself. This is why shortcuts were denied. Quick gains without capacity create collapse. You are being protected from overflow without structure, from opportunity without preparation, from visibility without grounding. What felt like delay was actually reinforcement. Your foundation was being strengthened so that when things increase, you remain steady. Clearing space also involves identity. Some versions of yourself cannot accompany you into the next season. The one who survived may not be the one who thrives. Survival patterns are useful in crisis, but they limit expansion. Hypervigilance, self-protection, and constant control exhaust capacity. Thriving requires trust, openness, and adaptability. Letting go of old identity can feel like loss. You may grieve who you were, what you endured, or how you coped. That grief is valid, but it does not mean you are abandoning your story. You are honoring it by evolving beyond it. Growth does not erase the past. It integrates it into wisdom. Capacity increases when alignment replaces attachment. Attachment clings to what is familiar. Alignment responds to what is right. You are learning the difference. Some things felt safe because they were known, not because they were aligned. Releasing them creates uncertainty, but it also creates freedom. Freedom is space. Space to receive peace without suspicion. Space to receive love without fear. Space to receive abundance without guilt. Space to receive opportunity without self-sabotage. These are not small shifts, they are foundational. You may notice that your tolerance for chaos is decreasing. What you once endured now feels unacceptable. What you once ignored now demands resolution. This is not impatience. It is discernment. Your capacity for clarity has grown, and misalignment is more obvious. You are no longer willing to carry what drains you. This is preparation in action. Not dramatic, not rushed, intentional, internal, sustainable. Breakthrough is not an event. It is a process that culminates in release. The release is only possible because the preparation was complete. Capacity has been built. Space has been cleared. Alignment has been established. You are not losing anything of value. What leaves now makes room for what lasts. What ends now clears the path for what expands. What you release now returns as peace, clarity, and strength. Clearing space is not punishment. It is partnership. You are cooperating with what is unfolding by making room for it. You are choosing readiness over resistance, capacity over clutter, alignment over attachment. And because you have made space, what is coming will not overwhelm you. It will fit. It will grow. It will remain. This is preparation fulfilled. This is readiness embodied, and this is why the breakthrough can finally arrive. Unaddressed pain does not remain neutral. Over time, it reshapes perception, distorts judgment, and quietly rewrites expectations. What began as a wound becomes a filter through which everything is interpreted. Trust feels risky. Hope feels fragile. Joy feels temporary. Without realizing it, you may begin to protect yourself not only from harm, but also from possibility. This is how the heart closes, not out of rebellion, but out of survival. Yet what once protected you can now prevent you from moving forward. When the heart is crowded with unresolved pain, there is little room left for faith to expand. Prayers may still be spoken, but they echo off inner walls built by disappointment. You may ask for more while subconsciously bracing for loss. You may hope for change while expecting it to fail. This inner contradiction creates tension. Heaven may be ready to release, but the vessel is not yet open. Not because you are unworthy, but because you are still carrying what was never meant to stay with you this long. Pain demands attention, not avoidance. What you suppress does not disappear. It settles deeper. What you refuse to feel continues to influence you from beneath the surface. This is why healing is not passive. It is an intentional act of courage. To acknowledge pain is not to relive it endlessly, but to bring it into the light where it can finally lose its power. Healing begins the moment you stop pretending you are unaffected and start allowing truth to surface. There is a difference between remembering and reliving. Remembering brings wisdom. Reliving keeps you trapped. Unresolved wounds pull you back into old emotional states, even when circumstances have changed. You may be standing at the threshold of a new season while still reacting from an old one. This mismatch is exhausting. It drains energy clouds, discernment, and delays alignment. The heart cannot move forward while constantly looking backward. Heaven does not demand perfection, but it does require honesty. You are not asked to deny what hurt you. You are asked to stop letting it define you. When wounds remain unhealed, they quietly dictate boundaries, relationships, and decisions. They influence what you believe you deserve. They shape how much joy you allow yourself to experience. Healing restores choice. It returns authority to you. Before anything new can enter, space must be made. This is not about punishment or loss. It is about preparation. You cannot receive with clenched hands. You cannot move freely while carrying excess weight. Addressing old pain is not reopening the wound. It is finally closing it properly. It is choosing to lay down what has been heavy for too long, so that what is light can finally take its place. This is not a call to rush the process, but to begin it. Healing does not always happen instantly, but it always begins with willingness. The willingness to feel. The willingness to release. The willingness to trust that what comes next will not require you to remain armored. As the old weight is lifted, clarity returns. Peace finds room to settle. And the heart becomes capable again. Capable of receiving what heaven has been offering all along. Forgiveness is not an emotion. It is a decision. Feelings may resist it. Memories may protest it. And the mind may argue against it. But forgiveness does not wait for comfort. It moves ahead of comfort. It is the moment you choose to stop allowing yesterday to dictate today. As long as forgiveness is postponed, the past remains active, influencing reactions, shaping expectations, and quietly limiting what you believe is possible for you. Forgiveness draws a line and says, "This no longer has permission to govern my inner world." Many misunderstand forgiveness as weakness, but it is one of the strongest acts a person can make. It requires confronting pain honestly, and then refusing to let that pain continue to rule. Holding on to resentment feels like control, but it is actually bondage. It keeps you tied to the very moment you wish you could forget. Forgiveness cuts the cord. It does not erase the memory, but it removes the charge. The event may still exist in your history, but it no longer dominates your present or determines your future. When forgiveness is withheld, emotional and spiritual energy remains trapped. You may move forward externally while staying internally anchored to old wounds. This creates exhaustion, trying to build something new while carrying something old. Forgiveness releases that energy. What was once consumed by resentment becomes available for clarity, creativity, and strength. Capacity increases. You begin to have room again for peace, for joy, for trust, for growth. Forgiveness also restores alignment. Unforgiveness distorts perception. It causes you to see people, opportunities, and even yourself through the lens of past injury. This leads to overguarding, self-sabotage, and missed connections. Forgiveness clears the lens. It allows discernment without suspicion and boundaries without bitterness. You become able to move wisely without being ruled by fear. Choosing forgiveness does not mean you allow the same behavior again. Boundaries and forgiveness are not opposites. Forgiveness frees the heart. Boundaries protect it. You can forgive and still walk away. You can release the offense without reopening the door. Forgiveness is internal freedom, not external permission. It ensures that even if someone remains unchanged, you are no longer imprisoned by their actions. Without forgiveness, readiness collapses under pressure. Old wounds resurface during new challenges. Triggers emerge where peace should be. But when forgiveness has been established, The heart remains steady, even when circumstances shake. You are no longer reacting from pain. You are responding from strength. This is why forgiveness is essential to preparation. What you are stepping into requires emotional stability, spiritual clarity, and inner freedom. Forgiveness returns ownership of your life to you. It shifts power away from the past and places it firmly in the present. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. You stop needing others to change before you can be free. You become free because you chose it. And in that freedom, readiness becomes sustainable. The heart remains open, the mind stays clear, and the path forward no longer feels blocked. Sarah's story is not unique because of its details, but because of its pattern. It reveals a spiritual principle that repeats itself wherever true transformation occurs. For a long time, she believed she was waiting on change, when in reality, change was waiting on her. The moment she released the weight she had been carrying, momentum returned. What had felt delayed was no longer blocked. What had seemed distant moved closer. This is how release works, not as coincidence, but as alignment. For years, Sarah's mind was occupied with rehearsing the same moments. Every memory replayed kept the wound active. Though time passed, the pain remained present because it was continually revisited. This is how many people live without realizing it. The body moves forward, but the heart stays anchored to a moment that should have ended long ago. Release breaks this cycle. It interrupts repetition. It signals to the inner world that the season has changed. When Sarah chose to forgive, something subtle but powerful happened. Her emotional energy, once tied to the past, was reclaimed. Thoughts that once circled endlessly began to settle. Mental clarity returned, not because circumstances changed overnight, but because her inner resistance dissolved. Peace entered where tension had lived. This peace was not passive. It was activating. It allowed her to see opportunities that had been present but unnoticed. Release sharpened perception. Opportunities often do not appear suddenly. They become visible when inner noise quiets. Bitterness and resentment act like static, distorting signals. When that static is removed, guidance becomes clearer. Intuition sharpens. Decisions become easier. This is why transformation accelerates after release. Energy, once consumed by holding on, becomes available for moving forward. Sarah did not become a different person overnight. Her environment did not magically perfect itself. What changed was her capacity. She had room to receive. When the heart is cleansed, it no longer filters everything through pain. It becomes responsive instead of defensive. This shift changes how you show up in conversations, how you recognize opportunity, and how you trust timing. Release also restores self-respect. Carrying resentment often keeps a person tied to the role of victim. Forgiveness does not deny the harm, it simply refuses to let that harm continue defining identity. When Sarah released the offense, she reclaimed authorship over her own story. She was no longer reacting to what had been done to her. She was choosing what came next. This is empowerment. Transformation accelerates because alignment is restored. When inner resistance dissolves, outer movement increases. This is not mystical thinking. It is practical truth. A clear heart leads to clear decisions. Clear decisions lead to aligned action. Aligned action produces momentum. Momentum attracts opportunity. What looks like sudden breakthroughs is often the natural result of internal clarity, finally catching up with external readiness. What Sarah released determined what she could receive. By letting go of bitterness, she made room for trust. By releasing resentment, she created space for creativity. By forgiving, she reopened access to joy. These were not rewards for good behavior. They were consequences of freedom. The heart can only carry so much. When it is overloaded with unresolved emotion, it cannot hold what is new. This principle applies across every area of life. In relationships, unresolved pain causes distance, even when connection is desired. In work, resentment clouds judgment and limits collaboration. In personal growth, unforgiveness stalls progress because energy remains divided. Release unifies the inner world. It allows all parts of you to move in the same direction. Readiness, then, is not about striving harder. It is about carrying less. It is about recognizing what has expired and choosing not to drag it into a new season. Sarah did not chase opportunity. She prepared for it by clearing space. When readiness was established internally, external movement followed naturally. This is why cleansing the heart is foundational, not as a one-time act, but as a practice of awareness. Each season asks something different of you. What served you once may now limit you. What protected you before may now restrict you. Release is how you honor growth. It is how you acknowledge that you are no longer who you were. Transformation accelerates where space exists. Space allows new thoughts to form. Space allows peace to settle. Space allows guidance to be heard. Without space, even the greatest opportunity feels overwhelming. With space, even challenges become manageable. Release creates that space. What you release determines what you receive because it determines what you have room to carry. A heart free of bitterness can carry responsibility without collapsing. A mind free of resentment can handle clarity without fear. A spirit free of old wounds can sustain blessing without self-sabotage. Sarah's story is not a formula, but it is a mirror. It reflects what is possible when you stop holding what no longer belongs to you. Release does not erase the past, but it ends its control. And when control is released, movement begins. What has been waiting for you can finally approach, not because it changed, but because you did. Delays, struggles, and silent warfare are often misunderstood because they rarely come with explanations. In the moment, they feel like absence of progress, of clarity, of affirmation. Yet nothing in this season was wasted. What appeared as stagnation was actually construction. What felt like resistance was refinement. The silence was not abandonment. It was intentional shaping, taking place beyond public view. Seasons like these do not announce their purpose while you are in them, but they reveal their value once the work is complete. There are battles you fought that no one saw, inner conflicts, private disappointments, unanswered prayers, and moments where you questioned whether you were still moving forward at all. This kind of warfare leaves no visible scars, yet it demands strength at the deepest level. Endurance formed here is not loud, but it is lasting. It develops resilience that does not depend on applause or reassurance. This is the kind of strength required for what comes next. The story of Joseph illustrates this pattern clearly. He was given a vision early, but the path to its fulfillment led downward before it rose. Betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned, each stage appeared to contradict the promise he had received. Yet none of it was random. Each environment trained a different part of him. In Potiphar's house, Joseph learned administration. In prison, he learned discernment, patience, and humility. What looked like setbacks were classrooms in disguise. Joseph's preparation was largely hidden. There were no crowds watching him interpret dreams in a prison cell. No recognition when he chose integrity over convenience. No validation during years of confinement. But character was being formed in secrecy. Leadership was being shaped without spotlight. This is often how true readiness is built, not where it can be praised, but where it can be tested without distraction. Sudden acceleration only appears sudden to those who did not witness the preparation. When Joseph was called from prison to stand before Pharaoh, the shift was immediate. In a single day, he moved from confinement to command. Yet the speed of his elevation did not negate the years of endurance that preceded it. Acceleration followed alignment. Promotion followed preparation. What had taken years to build internally allowed him to step into authority without being overwhelmed by it. This pattern repeats because it is necessary. Public elevation without private formation leads to collapse. Visibility without depth creates instability. God builds capacity in quiet places so that when opportunity arrives, it does not destroy what it was meant to reward. The waiting season is not a delay in purpose. It is the establishment of foundation. Your own season of endurance served the same function. Every delay trained patience. Every closed door refined discernment. Every moment of silence forced you to rely on inner conviction rather than external affirmation. You learned to stand without constant reassurance. You learned to keep moving without immediate results. These are not small lessons. They are essential ones. Character formed in secrecy carries weight in public. It sustains clarity under pressure. It keeps humility intact during success. It allows influence to be carried without distortion. What you endured privately prepared you to lead publicly without losing yourself. This is why the preparation phase cannot be rushed or skipped. Now the shift you are sensing is not imagined. It signals completion. The internal work has reached maturity. Endurance has done its work. Capacity has expanded. The resistance that once trained you is no longer needed in the same way. Acceleration follows because stability has been established. This does not mean the path ahead will be effortless, but it will be aligned. You will move with clarity rather than confusion. You will recognize opportunity rather than chase it. You will carry responsibility without being crushed by it. What once required struggle now responds to readiness. The preparation phase is now complete. What was built in silence is ready to be expressed in motion. What was refined in obscurity is ready for visibility. The season of endurance has fulfilled its purpose. Acceleration follows, not because time has passed, but because formation is finished. Alignment is not something that happens to you while you stand still. It responds to participation. Passivity may look like patience, but often it is fear disguised as waiting. True alignment requires movement, intentional, conscious, and sometimes uncomfortable movement. You are not asked to understand every detail before you act. You are asked to respond. Alignment is activated when decision meets obedience. Faith has always preceded visible evidence. This is the principle revealed at the edge of the Red Sea. The waters did not part while the people waited for proof. The instruction was clear and simple: go forward. Only when they moved did the impossible open. The obstacle in front of them was not a barrier. It was a stage. It existed not to stop them, but to display divine power through their obedience. Movement activated the miracle. This principle remains unchanged. What looks like resistance is often positioning. What appears as an obstacle may be the very place where alignment is demonstrated and power is revealed. When you move in faith without guarantees, you declare readiness. Heaven responds to motion, not hesitation. Miracles do not respond to fear. They respond to alignment expressed through action. But there is one final gate that must be passed before movement can be sustained. One internal threshold that determines whether alignment holds or collapses under pressure. This gate is forgiveness. Forgiveness is not an optional virtue in this season. It is the final requirement for readiness. You cannot move forward freely while being anchored to the past. Forgiveness is the act that unties you from what no longer belongs in your future. It is not weakness, it is authority, reclaimed. The first step is acknowledging the pain. This is where many resist, believing acknowledgement will reopen wounds. In truth, denial keeps wounds alive. God does not require you to minimize what happened. The betrayal was real. The loss was real. The disappointment was real. Honesty is the foundation of healing. What you bring into the light begins to lose its power over you. The second step is recognizing the burden. Unforgiveness is not neutral. It weighs on the mind, strains the body, and clouds discernment. It consumes emotional energy and drains spiritual clarity. When you carry resentment, you carry the past with you into every present moment. This burden limits capacity. You cannot fully receive while already overloaded. The third step is releasing the offense. This is the turning point. Release does not mean what happened was acceptable. It means you refuse to let it continue controlling you. Release is a decision to stop rehearsing the wound. It is choosing freedom over familiarity. When you release the offense, you interrupt its authority over your thoughts, reactions, and expectations. The fourth step is reclaiming personal authority. Forgiveness returns power to you. As long as resentment remains someone else, whether present or absent, has influence over your inner world. When you forgive, you take back that influence. You stop waiting for apologies, explanations, or closure from others. You become self-governed again. Authority is restored. The fifth step is embracing freedom. Freedom is not the absence of memory. It is the absence of control. You remember without reliving. You move forward without dragging the past behind you. In this freedom, clarity returns. Peace stabilizes. Energy increases. Alignment becomes sustainable. Forgiveness restores more than emotions. It restores alignment at every level. Mental clarity sharpens. Emotional stability returns. Physical tension releases. Many carry pain in the body long after the event has passed. When forgiveness occurs, the body often responds with renewed vitality. The heart settles, the mind clears, the spirit lifts. Scripture reinforces this principle. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. 1 John 9. Cleansing precedes receiving. Cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you. Psalm 55:22. Sustaining power follows release. Forgiveness is not the end of the journey. It is the gate that allows the journey to continue without collapse. Without forgiveness, movement may begin, but it will not last. Old triggers resurface. Fear interrupts momentum. But when forgiveness is complete, alignment holds under pressure. Now, the instruction is the same as it has always been. Go forward. Not after everything feels safe. Not after every fear disappears. Go forward with a cleared heart, an unburdened mind, and restored authority. The obstacle is no longer a barrier. It is a platform. Movement activates miracles. Alignment responds to obedience. And forgiveness ensures that when the path opens, you are free enough to walk through it. Mental clarity begins to replace confusion when the inner world is healed. Thoughts that once felt scattered start to organize themselves naturally. Decisions that used to feel heavy become lighter, clearer, more intuitive. You no longer second-guess every step because your mind is no longer divided between the present and unresolved pain from the past. Clarity is not something you force. It is something that emerges when inner resistance dissolves. As the mind clears, direction becomes visible. Emotional healing follows closely behind. Joy returns not as a fleeting emotion, but as a steady undercurrent. Peace settles in places that were once ruled by anxiety and tension. This peace does not depend on circumstances being perfect. It exists because the heart is no longer at war with itself. Healing restores emotional range. You can feel deeply again, without fear of collapse. You can experience happiness without bracing for loss. This is not emotional numbness. It is emotional freedom. As healing deepens, spiritual sensitivity increases. Discernment sharpens. You begin to sense what is aligned and what is not without needing external validation. Intuition becomes clearer because it is no longer clouded by fear-based thinking. You recognize warning signs sooner. You notice opportunities faster. Spiritual awareness expands when the heart is unburdened. Alignment makes perception accurate. What happens internally does not stay hidden. External life begins to reflect internal renewal. Relationships shift. Some deepen, becoming healthier and more honest. Others fall away naturally, not in conflict, but in completion. Health responds as tension releases and stress lessens its grip. Confidence rises not as arrogance, but as grounded self-assurance. Influence increases because peace is magnetic. People sense stability. They trust clarity. Restoration touches everything. This leads into a profound transition of identity. The old identity cannot carry the new assignment. Who you were while surviving cannot sustain who you are becoming while leading. Old patterns, coping mechanisms, and self-definitions were formed in seasons of limitation. They served a purpose then, but they cannot accompany you forward. Growth demands change at the level of identity. This is why the metaphor of metamorphosis is so accurate. A caterpillar does not become a better caterpillar. It becomes something entirely new. The cocoon looks like confinement, even like loss. But inside, transformation is occurring at a cellular level. The old form dissolves so a new one can emerge. The butterfly does not struggle to crawl, it flies. Access changes. Perspective changes. Authority changes. Fear is replaced with authority. You no longer approach life defensively. You move deliberately. You stop shrinking in rooms where you belong. Worth replaces insecurity. You no longer measure yourself by others' reactions or approval. You know who you are, and that knowledge stabilizes you. Favor begins to silence mockery, not through confrontation, but through fruit. Results speak. Peace speaks. Consistency speaks. Elevation is not revenge. It is evidence. Evidence that the process worked. Evidence that preparation was sufficient. Evidence that transformation was real. You are not lifted to prove others wrong. You are lifted to demonstrate what alignment produces. Elevation reveals formation. However, there is a warning that accompanies breakthrough. Resistance often intensifies when progress is closest. Distractions appear. Doubt resurfaces. Emotional triggers may activate unexpectedly. This is not regression. It is confirmation. Resistance increases when what you are stepping into has weight. Do not misinterpret opposition as a sign to stop. Recognize it as evidence that movement is effective. Stay focused. Stay grounded. Stay resolute. Do not re-engage old battles that no longer deserve your energy. Do not rehearse old fears that no longer define you. Maintain clarity by returning to what you know is true. Alignment is sustained by consistency, not emotional fluctuation. Now comes activation. Alignment requires action. Begin practically. Write down the names of those you need to forgive. This externalizes the decision and gives it form. Clean your physical space. Environment influences clarity more than most realize. Remove what represents the old season. Pray intentionally, not vaguely, but with awareness and honesty. Speak declarations aloud. Words carry power. As written, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Proverbs 18:21. What you speak repeatedly shapes what you experience. Stand in front of a mirror and declare your new identity. Look yourself in the eyes and affirm what is now true. Speak until it feels real. Not because words are magic, but because repetition aligns belief. You are not convincing the world, you are aligning yourself. This is not emotional hype. It is destiny alignment. The door is open now. Forgiveness, faith, and action seal the shift. Waiting has ended. Preparation is complete. Declare it clearly. I am chosen. I am prepared. I am ready. And now, the final question stands not as pressure, but as invitation. Will you move with heaven or remain standing at the door?